Hello, and thank you for joining us. The Southeast Mental Health Technology Transfer Center would like to welcome you to today's webinar event, Peer Support for Dual Recovery and Treatment Settings, with our partners from Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network. My name is Stephanie, and I will be assisting with today's event. But before beginning today's presentation, I would like to say a few words about our center and address a few housekeeping items. Please note that the work of the Southeast MHTTC is supported by a grant from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. A few notes that we want to remind everyone about today's event. This event is being recorded and will be made available on our website for on-demand viewing soon, usually in 3 to 5 days. We encourage you to share your comments throughout the presentation using the chat feature. Please remember to select chat with all attendees if you would like to share your thoughts with everyone. We have allotted some time at the end of our presentation for the presenters to answer some questions. Please submit your question using the Q&A feature found at the bottom of your screen. And finally, for those individuals who are interested in a certificate of attendance, it will be available for download upon completion of our evaluation surveys. Again, thank you for joining us, and we want to turn it over to Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. Welcome. My name is Chris Johnson. I am a person in long-term recovery. What that means for me is it's been about 14 years since my mental health challenges have prevented me from leading a full, productive, and rewarding life. Today, I am an active and contributing member of my family, my workplace, and my community. Today, I show up. Today, I do what I'm supposed to do each day, most days. And I am happy to be here today with my dear friends and colleagues, Rosalind Hayes and Heather James, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves and we will get this going. Heather, would you like to go first?
I will. Hi, everybody. My name is Heather James. I'm a certified peer specialist. I'm supervisor for the Kaiser Permanente with the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Project. And I'm also a person in long-term recovery. And what that means to me, that it has been a little over 6 years since I have dealt with my mental health challenges. I no longer feel like I have to wear a mask and pretend to be somebody that I am not to be. I'm able to live openly, freely, and authentically me without shame or fear of judgment. I'm able to show up with my friends, my family, and my work to be the best person that I choose to be.
Thank you, Heather, and welcome to the team, Heather. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rosalind Hayes, and I too am a person in long-term recovery. And what that means for me is that I do what I've found works for me to be able to suit up and show up for my life. Today is very fitting that I'm here with you all on a recovery month event about dual recovery. I just found out an hour or so ago that an old friend of mine died by overdose, and so I'm a bit shaken, but just, you know, I'm grateful for recovery today. And recovery for me represents opportunity, y'all. It represents life, and it represents an endless number of possibility. So I am grateful, and I'm glad to be here with you all this afternoon. And I will give it back to you, Heather. Oh, no, first I want to introduce our panelists. Let's see who's with us today, because we do have a panel of folks here who have joined us. And right now it looks like we have a panel of one. Mr. Philip Bailey, tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Roz. I am Philip Bailey. I am the Director of Professional Relations for the state of Georgia for Embark Behavioral Health. I'm also a certified peer specialist for mental health and a person living in recovery. What that means for me is that I try every day to be the best me that I can be for that day. Sometimes in that 15 minutes, I have my family, I have my dad, and I have my job, I have a car, and it just seems to me that every day I wake up, recovery is just a blessing for me to try something new every single day and to give back.
Thank you, Philip. We hope to have two others join us, but in the meantime, Heather, I will give it back to you.
I see Chris and Roz on. I mean, Roz, I see Chris and Ray on.
Okay, let me close the chat. Maybe that would help. All right, so Chris, CD, tell us who you are, sir.
Hey
And
everybody,
thank you
my
for
name
being-
is Chris Dowling. I am a certified peer specialist. I work at one of our peer support and respite centers here in Moultrie, Georgia. And I'm also a person in long-term recovery. And what that means for me is for almost 9 years, my mental health challenges have not gotten in the way of me being able to be a productive member of society, to be a CPS for the last almost 7 years now. It's hard to believe, time has flown by pretty fast. And it's allowed me to be a husband, a son, and a productive member of society. So I'm just glad to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. 7 years. Wow. Ray. Hi, Ray. Tell us who you are.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ray Thompson. I'm a person in long-term recovery. And what that means for me is that it's been more than 11 years since I've decided to take control over my life. I've been sidelined by some self-deprecating behaviors and some self-medicating behaviors. Today, I show up for me, and I'm no longer going out trying to rescue the world and wearing a superhero cape, thinking that if whatever I do for other people is going to be something that also helps me. I've learned that no, I've got to actually help me first. And so I've been employed for 8 years with the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network, minus a few months, and that's the longest I have been employed in my adult life. I'm really grateful for every opportunity that I have been afforded, and I'm grateful to be here with each and every one of you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Now we'll give it back to Heather.
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Today we will talk about peer support for dual recovery and treatment settings. Our learning objectives will be to identify the benefits to a focused dual recovery program, explain the challenges faced by providers, especially small providers, in providing a third track, and lastly, list multiple strategies for ensuring that even in systems where a third track is not available, program participants understand their diagnosis and that unique dual recovery resources are available and encouraged for them to use in support of their dual recovery. We have collected some data to present to you guys today. And so one of the tidbits that we found is that approximately 47.6 million Americans are living with any mental health challenge. That is a huge number. And that also kind of adds to the fact that in supports of the reason why we need to have peer support within treatment facilities, to put people in facilities that have that lived experience to support people from a place of understanding and without judgment. If we go to the next slide. And another information that we found was from an article that talked about improving services for individuals with dual diagnosis. And it had the statistic that showed that almost 80% of individuals that have substance use clients in treatment have co-current diagnosis of either anxiety or depression. So that further proves that there are many of us out there that have both mental health diagnosis and or substance use. And another one that we found that was very interesting is within the United States, they looked at that they saw that there's almost 10,000 mental health facilities within the United States. However, out of those 10,000, only about 25% actually use peer services. So that goes to show that, even though peer support is great, we still have a lot of work to do to get peer support within treatment facilities so that we can be out there and show up and support our fellow peers that are having their own challenges. And the last statistic that we found within research that I'm sure, unfortunately, people on this webinar has experienced themselves is that we found that individuals who have dual diagnosis have a harder time getting into treatment because the system, behavioral health system, lacks the ability to be flexible. Meaning, if you have a mental health diagnosis as well as a substance use diagnosis, and you need to go into treatment for your substance use, a lot of times individuals were being denied treatment because they had mental health challenges and were on mental health medications. The other side of that was that we found that individuals who may have a substance use diagnosis who called a crisis line needing mental health services, somebody to come out, were denied that treatment because of simply having a dual diagnosis, which shows that we have a lot of education to do sometimes within our behavioral health system to show the importance of working together and treating individuals that have a dual diagnosis. I'm going to pass it on to Chris now.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. I will just throw in while we're on this topic, the what people have to go through to get services, and it's not just in Georgia, it's pretty much everywhere, I believe, but everyone that I've spoken to in our field, you know, to get into treatment, like for like meth users, the way to get into treatment most of the time is you have to start drinking. Because if you don't, your window's going to pass. If you haven't used within the past 72 hours, you're not eligible for treatment. And it's just mind-boggling that our regulations can't keep up with the reality. And the reality of our lives is what we're supposed to be coming to grips with. So let's see if we can come to grips with some understanding of dual recovery today in this clinical setting that we're talking about. But also in our lives, because it all comes together. And we're going to start with some questions for each of our panelists here. And Roz and Heather, if you guys want to jump in, you can jump in as well. But we want to hear from our panelists first. Let's see. Let's go with Chris Dowling, because he's my friend. They're all my friends. But Chris, go ahead. Tell us, what is your personal definition of dual recovery?
Dual recovery, my personal definition is taking two sides of my recovery and putting them together. They're two parts of the same for me. So my mental health and my addiction challenges go hand in hand. So I never treated both. I either treated one or the other, and never worked for me. So when I was able to discover dual recovery, which I discovered at one of our centers, I realized that that is my personal recovery. And so being able to take both and merging those together, they're not separate anymore. They go hand in hand. And that has allowed me to live the life I live today.
And the reason you probably treated them separately was because that was your only option. Like,
yeah, that was it for a long time. It wasn't until I got to treatment and I found a dual recovery meeting that I realized how amazing it was and how they do go hand in hand and they're not separate.
Yeah, when you stay at a place long enough, you see people bounce back and forth from track to track, depending on what behavior, what symptom got them into the place. Let's see, Ray, how about you? What you got?
Well, for me, when I think about dual recovery, it's a parallel process of managing my health and wellness from the two perspectives, because for so long I was only focused on the mental health side of it, and I realized that when I chose recovery, that recovery started to transcend across all areas of my life, and it was never just about my mental health challenges. I had to also get honest with the things that I was actually doing to support myself with the mental health symptoms. And when I got real honest with myself, and I was like, well, Ray, this, if it's not a problem, is definitely leading to another problem, because substances, is something that you really need to take a look at. And so for me, it's that parallel process of looking at both sides of the things that I'm dealing with, my mental health challenges and the unhealthy way that I was attempting to manage it in silence.
Thank you for that. Okay, who we got? Mr. Philip Bailey.
It's me. So for me, my personal definition of dual recovery is, again, just go echo a little bit. It is hand in hand, mental health, substance abuse. When I'm talking about my mental health, my intrusive thoughts, my negative thinking and my stinking thinking, making sure that I have both of those under control. Now that I'm been through treatment a few times and been through different places and, taking a little bit of this, a little bit of that, of course, the meat and potatoes of things. And I've learned to express and effectively communicate my mental health and my feelings in order to uphold my recovery. Again, it's that balancing scale. You can't have just one without the other because you're going to drop one somewhere.
Awesome, thank you. Those were, I mean, there was some diversity there. I mean, there was overlap for sure, but I mean, you each do have a really unique perspective. Roz, Heather, do you all have anything you'd like to add?
I just wanted to throw in that substance use disorder is found in the DSM. And maybe it's there for billing purposes, but nonetheless, it is in the diagnostic and statistical manual used to diagnose mental illness. And so somewhere folks know that they are one and the same. I mean, and like you said, Chris, depending on what is presenting itself, most at that moment is usually determines the direction that we go. And it is so unfortunate that we do have to go through what we have to go through to get services, to get what we need. We get dinged all the time and labeled as manipulators, yet we have to navigate a system that requires us to quote unquote manipulate to get our needs met. So that's all I have.
Wrong. Yeah, I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, why do we even call it dual recovery? Because most of us are recovering from something else as well, like some trauma, something, some stuff. And it's like, oh, because of the singleness of purpose of some other programs, it's like, okay, we don't have a singleness of purpose, we have a dualness of purpose. But really, it goes beyond that. I think for most of us, at least for most of us who have dual recovery, there's, I think through trauma-informed care training, I think we've learned to look for and spot trauma here and there and everywhere, or close to everywhere. Let's go on to the Heather, anything? No.
Yeah, the only thing I just had to add is that, when it comes to recovery, dual recovery, it's just one of those things of, see us as like a whole person. Don't try to separate because everything connects. What is going on with me physically affects me mentally, what's going on with me financially, it all interconnects. And so when you're able to just see the whole person and treat the whole person, I feel like we can move beyond a single diagnosis or like dual diagnosis and just treat us for what our challenges are at that point in time.
Thank you. Okay, who are we going to start with this time? Let's start with Ray. Ray, if you were ever in a treatment setting, did you receive treatment for dual diagnosis specifically or any other treatment that prepared you for dual recovery in the real world?
Well, when I did participate in treatments services, no, I wasn't. At the time, I really wanted to address the mental health challenges because I felt like those things were at the forefront of what was going on with me. And that was the major barrier to me being able to get up off that couch and start moving forward in my life. And so I did not share about the self-medicating that I was actually doing. There was just this fear of addressing that at that time. I really just wanted to know what was going on with me and if that could actually be resolved and what could I actually do to start moving forward.
Thank you. Philip, how about you?
Yeah, so the program that I went to a rehab, and I was ready. I was willing. I was at my rock bottom, ready to go. And I really didn't know what I was getting into. Didn't know what kind of services would be there. It was just my family said, "This is where you're going," so I went. When I got there and started understanding more of the program, what it looked like, I did have a counselor. that was tied to my treatment. We did meet weekly. They tried to include substance abuse and mental health. There were a few things that were one-sided that it did feel like. In terms of, in the real world, I just don't think I got exactly 100% what I needed from the program that I went to. I really feel that there could have been some changes made.
Awesome. And Mr. Dowling.
Yeah, I was just sitting there thinking, my mental health came first with me. I was first on medication at 7 years old. So I was part of that Prozac nation in that sense. I was when they started giving the kids medications, and so in my mind for a long time, I was if I didn't feel like the way I felt, I took something, and then that kind of spiraled into my addiction challenges. I never treated both. It was so much easier for me to say that I was an addict than it was for me to say I had mental health challenges. It was something that to me, even though there's stigma on both, people seem to be more understanding and like, oh, okay, he does drugs, than to be he has mental health. No, he has mental health challenges. So I was never treated both. I was either in psychiatric hospitals most of my early life, or I was in spin drives, rehabs, and detoxes. It wasn't until 2015 when I turned 30. I was already 30 by the time I found out. I went through a program here in Moultrie, Georgia called Turning Point, long-term program that dealt with both my addiction and my mental health and showed me how they go hand in hand. And I also noticed that, when I dealt with my mental health, the need to want to self-medicate was not there. But it prepared me for the sense in the way that I can share my story in a way that shows both sides, that shows my dual recovery, that it is one recovery. Like you were saying, CJ, that dual part, it's one recovery. And I have to deal with both at the same time. And I deal with them in the same way, very similar way, and there is so much resources around me. I'm lucky in the area that I live in. I have so much resources with dual recovery and our DTR meetings and that we have, that it has prepared me to be able to share my story in a way that can connect to others so they don't have to wait as long to be able to know how they can deal with both their mental health and their addiction.
Thanks for that, Chris. Yeah, you really are fortunate you're in Moultrie because you have so many resources there. I think, NAMI Moultrie really keeps it going. That whole community down there, it's fantastic. We when I was 17 and I was hospitalized for the first time, I don't know, maybe had like 5 beers or something in my life. And there was one counselor there who I was there for like way longer than I needed to be, but there was one counselor there who was convinced I was an addict and an alcoholic. And the other counselors, they just would not hear it. Right. And I found out later that there were serious like discussions in the staff meetings and stuff, treatment team. And he tried to convince them. He was like, if you all don't fix this, it was but he finally sat me down on my last day of treatment and said, they told me I can't tell you this, but I'm going to tell you. He told me my last day of treatment. He thought I was a drug addict and an alcoholic. And that probably wasn't the best time to do it, but it was good for me to hear it. Anyway, that co-occurring thing. Heather, do you have anything you'd like to add here?
Yeah, for me, it was kind of similar to what others went through. Mine was more so focusing on mental health. I was in a trauma program, so it was purely, focusing on mental health. I will say it was probably one of the first times I celebrated my birthday. Not drinking because I was in a facility for my birthday. you know, but one of my savings grace is that like case manager, they were contracted. She was also an addiction counselor. And so after my treatment, if we wanted to use somebody who was one of their case managers for our private therapy, we could. And so it was after that, I was able to partner with her and we were able to focus on both my mental health and, why I was self-medicating. But while I was in treatment, it was just purely focusing on mental health.
How about you?
For me, it's been pretty much the same. It's always been the focus on substance and not much else. I mean, lately I understand that, there are places that people go where, they get lots of mental health medications while they're there, but I don't know that they necessarily dive into the mental health side, but they do medicate. Um, and for me, I believe that the bridge to all of this, Chris, is what you mentioned, and that is trauma. For so many, at the heart of either their mental health concerns or their substance use concerns is trauma. And I think if we can move towards that perspective, that is one way to kind of bridge the gap and bring this dual recovery idea to the forefront. And it would be a way to mesh the two, or to bring the two together, so that we are treated as a whole person, focusing on the traumas that kind of got us where we are.
Thank you, Rob. So let's just take a minute to celebrate like what's working, right? Because there are places in Georgia, there are communities, there are little pockets where dual recovery is thriving. And in most communities, there's at least one resource, one group that if you listen with half of willingness, you can hear something that's meaningful to you. But what do you think is going well with recovery today? Philip, how about you?
Yeah. So I've worked since becoming a CPSMH, I've worked at 2 programs. Both of those programs that I've worked at, I'm happy to say, was not just treat mental health, not just treat substance. When I used to work in admissions, having that peer-to-peer conversation and just real and raw, and just hearing that story of what's going on, and then me talking to our clinical team about, hey, this is what this person's going through, la la la. We would then map out their treatment plan based on those needs. Maybe there is no substance abuse. Great. Well, then they're not going to be in any kind of substance abuse classes or groups. But if there is, we could make that happen. We can make it work. At the program that I'm currently director of, Embark Behavioral Health. Now, we are a mental health and substance abuse program, primarily working with adolescents, teens, and young adults, but utilizing smart recovery. And of course, with that peer support, not only do we look at peer support for our clients, but also peer support for the family as well. This is not a one size fits all. Our team here knows that. And I'm, again, really blessed to have worked at these 2 programs, and they do see that too. A lot of our owners, a lot of our CEOs are peers, at least from a private program standpoint. So they do know what's going on. They do know, they've been there. That, again, having that dual, it does go hand in hand, and having that support for them.
Chris, you want to dive back in?
Yeah, I'll jump back in. I think today, I think dual recovery is much more recognized, and it's something that's being put out there information-wise. I was just thinking, one of the things that has helped that, I think that came out of just a terrible situation with during the pandemic, Zoom became a big thing. We're doing Zoom right now. The Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network started online recovery and wellness activities. We offer dual recovery meetings online. There's a whole other platform with the network that offers it 3 times a day, and so that has got information out there more through being able to have online support meetings, and also word of mouth, and just there seems to be more. You talk about those small pockets. Those pockets seem to be merging. There's a pocket here and a pocket there, and they start coming together. And when people find out about this, they're just, you know what I mean? They're like, this existed? As somebody who used traditional 12-step meetings for so long, when I came to my first double trouble meeting, I was just like, what is this amazing thing that I can openly talk about what's going on in my life, and I don't have to have somebody say that's an outside issue or you can't talk about that here. You know, I get, and then also being able to just tell everybody, dual recovery when it comes to addiction, it could be anything. It's just not drugs or alcohol. I mean, it could be food, it could be relationships, it could be anything of that sort, and we welcome you. And when it comes to meetings, it's not a cookie cutter meeting. We can be able to support whoever comes to that meeting the best we can, whether it's mental health or you're not sure about the addiction part, we can give you support. Dual recovery community is so open to anybody and welcomes everybody in. It's very inclusive. And I think that's what's making it more mainstream and for people to recognize the power it has and how it helps people.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Thompson.
Well, the first thing I want to say is one, the fact that dual recovery even exists and that there's even a term for us to actually even talk about. And the fact that we have these spaces that we can come in and we can explore what dual recovery means, and for other people to even pick up on the fact that perhaps I am in dual recovery, or maybe I want to focus on something else related to my recovery, because it's not just for me, it's not just the one thing. I remember dual recovery starting for me probably about 5 years ago, when I began to be honest with some of the secret things that I was doing. And I had a conversation with the previous director of Double Trouble in Recovery. And we would talk at CPS training, and I would ask her questions because something just kind of concerned me about the things that I was doing. And I was like, I challenged myself, and I was like, yeah, I got to be true to me. I'm focused on my mental health, but there are things that I'm doing that I'm not necessarily open and talking to other people about. And so once I found that safe space to be able to ask questions and to be able to share about myself medicating, I realized, okay, this is something that I can do. And so just being that it exists, that we're able to talk about it. And I feel like the more that we have these conversations and the more that we show up in spaces, is going to keep it going. I've been fortunate to join a faith-based recovery group, and it's wonderful because we get to talk about all the different pathways of recovery, and we can talk about any of the challenges that we have. And so just the openness just creates a safe space, and it just feels like there's a great open invitation almost anywhere I look today.
Right. Thanks for that, Ray. I was actually thinking yesterday about how, when I'm preparing for today and thinking about, like, what is going well with dual recovery today. One of the things, especially in rural Georgia and small towns in Georgia, Celebrate Recovery does fantastic work. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, and I don't need to know, but it, like, because they do have that approach in most of the places where I've been. They're welcoming, and there's a lot of faith up in there, but there's also a lot of healing and a lot of good stuff, and a lot of recovery, from whatever. So I didn't always feel that way about Celebrate Recovery. I mean, they were disparaged by some of the groups that I participated in and was an active member of. But I have learned over time that, they provide a value and a service in Georgia that lots of folks can't get anywhere else. So hats off to them. Roz? Nope. Okay.
I just echo everything that's been said. I love what Ray said. And the fact that we're here having this conversation on this platform, it's a way, the conversations are what's necessary. And the more we can come out and talk, and let the stigma go, the stigma on either side, the more free we are, and the more these opportunities present themselves.
Heather?
Yeah, I think the same thing what everybody else said. It's how I feel. I think the only thing I would add is that I like that I'm able to see within, especially within Georgia, within certain counties, their justice system is partnering up with treatment centers, and because they're recognizing that, putting people in jail is not the answer. Let's get them help. And so they're partnering up with community service boards, or like I said, other mental health providers or substance use providers to get individuals that have these dual diagnoses help versus putting them in jail. So I think that's a great thing that we're seeing today.
for that. We're going to turn a little bit. By turn a little bit, I mean do kind of a 180, I think is what we call it, and talk about what could be better, or what could be done differently to improve the impact of the dual recovery approach in Georgia specifically, but in the Southeast specifically as well. So two specifics there, one very broad. What do you all think? Because you've all been around for a minute, you've been deeply invested in this work for years, all of you, different numbers of years, but years, all of us. What can we be doing differently to improve that impact? Ray, why don't we start with you?
For me, what I believe is having more conversations about trauma, having more presentations about what trauma is, why trauma matters, and just how it shows up in people's lives. If we can have opportunities to share more of our stories about our experiences, because stigma is so great that oftentimes people are reluctant to talk about the mental health or the substance use challenges, but there's so many more people who have had trauma in their lives. And if we're actually able to talk a little bit more about trauma, we can actually find that, and it's been said before, that the mental health diagnoses perhaps, and even the substance use or misuse kind of came after all of that. For me, what I personally kind of want to start to move towards is being able to have more opportunities to speak in front of church groups and faith groups, because there's so much stigma there where people think that, well, because I don't have a diagnosis or because I don't use substances, I'm actually okay. And sometimes it even feels like I really don't have a word for it, but it's like they're separating themselves like they're better than someone else. And it's like what we talk about a lot in faith communities is that, you know, we all are more alike than we are different. And so if we can start talking about the trauma, we can actually propel the dual recovery approach, and it could be dual recovery from so many things that may not have necessarily anything to do with the diagnosis or with the substance challenges. Feel like I'm rambling, but yeah, that's where I am right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. I don't think you're rambling at all. Chris Dowling.
Hey, I saw somebody said I was echoing. I hope that I fixed that issue now.
No,
I'm no
you
longer
didn't.
Okay.
Don't worry about it.
All right. But I think for me, it's just continuing to get the information out there. And like Ray said, speaking about trauma, being able to share your personal experiences, your triumphs, where you came from, where you're at now, how dual recovery has benefited your recovery and your life. Getting other places on board, treatment centers, CSBs, other traditional 12-step meetings, to let them on board, like what this means for us as a community, just getting people on board, and also having funding to have these meetings, having people be able to facilitate these meetings, get information out there, and just be heard, lifting that stigma, saying, this is who I am in dual recovery, and it has made me be able to be who I am today, has gave me the life I have today, and share that strength, and take that mask off, whether you are somebody that is just somebody off the street, or if you're a CEO or a director or any of this, like, we are everywhere, you know what I mean? Kind of take that away, and it's like, we are here, and that this works, and this has worked for so many people. The more people that share that this works for them, and this gives them a safe place to be open and honest about both sides of their recovery, then that gives it more support, and it keeps moving forward. And like I said, it is blowing up already as is. But the more we do these things, the more that we put it out there, the more we speak on it, I think that it's going to improve it even more. And I just see it going even further than today. And I'm glad to be a part of that. And I'm glad to be a part of this today with all of y'all. So thank you.
Chris and Philip.
Yeah, so both of those are, great ideas and topics, but just to have the conversation is one thing, but to have the evidence behind it, to show and prove to these other programs that don't allow it, don't offer it, just to show, again, living proof that it works. Yes, we have us. Yes, we have numbers. compiling all that together, that is how I feel that we can make that change. And at least just asking the question of why? Why not? Why not try? Again, like I've mentioned, and I've been to programs that offered counseling. Was it exactly what I needed? No. Did I need to change that narrative a little bit? Yes. To make it for me, again, having to manipulate what's going around for me. But in terms of mental health, substance abuse, that trauma, moving that conversation again from what's wrong to you to what happened to you, and having that shame that surround that be healed by connection.
Fair enough. Connection is the opposite of what?
Addiction.
Addiction. The let's see.
Um,
Ross, what
Yeah,
do you have?
I just have to agree with the trauma informed approach. There is, statistics that say that up to 90% of the people who enter the public behavioral health system have experienced trauma. And when we think about that, it's pretty clear that, coming from a trauma-informed approach is the way to bridge the gap. And so I think that getting systems on board, getting programs on board so that they can drop these barriers, and whatever training that's necessary, so that these barriers, that oh, you can't have mental health medication if you're going to come into treatment. I mean, it creates such a problem, and keeps so many people, kind of out there running in circles. And if we were able to again come from that trauma informed approach, I think that could be a lot of the solution and moving us towards recovery from whatever it is, just recovery, so that people have opportunity to live, the lives of their choosing, and to, be well and to do the things that they want to do. To me, it seems so simple, but I know there's all this way that funding is set up, and you got these silos, and you get money for this or you get money for that. And so it's a systemic problem. And the only way to get some real change is through the behavioral health systems. I mean, we can do what we can do. We can have these conversations. We can, have our wellness centers and our RCOs and all those things. And still, if a person needs treatment, if they have mental health meds, they can't get in. And so, it's the system overall needs an overhaul.
I think everyone agrees with you, and at least in Georgia, right? Because we're doing that thing slowly. Heather.
Yeah, I think what everybody said, I wholeheartedly agree. And, I love that Philip mentioned that connection because, research also shows that individuals that have dual diagnosis, like when they are leaving treatment, if they are able to be connected to somebody after treatment, they have such a better chance of having effective recovery. And so just like more funding to support training initiatives to have more people go through and become CPSs, whether it's for mental health or for addictive diseases, so that we can provide individuals with this connection. I think also just to see peer support within the private sector. We see it so much on, the public sector, but there are so many individuals that have private health insurance that are just like, well, what's peer support? I never heard of peer support. Oh my gosh, if I had this, I would be so much further along within my recovery. So being able to talk to those private insurances or those private treatment centers to provide peer support or integrate peer support into their treatment settings.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think, the funding question is a real question. It's when organizations are looking at putting in a third track, which, by the way, tier 1 providers in Georgia, I don't know if it's this way in other states, tier 1 providers in Georgia are required to have a third track. Most of them don't. I think only 2 in the state have a really viable third track, but it's because of scale. In the smaller institutions, if you have a third track, it means you need a whole third staff, right, to staff these groups and all the activity and all the things all day. So really, when you put in a third group, you're really just taking people out of your other tracks. So I think one of the things we can do is we can figure this out, right? We put a man on the moon 50 years ago. We can figure out how to provide treatment for 3 different types of people, right? We just can. And I think, getting some brains together to really work through it. How can Medicaid billing work? How can we make it feasible? Because it's possible. I just know it's possible. And the only reason, it's not done is because of the money. I think sometimes we like to make monsters out of the, treatment providers, and especially the administration that are always cutting back and cutting back and cutting back. But the thing is, they wouldn't be doing this work if they didn't care about people. They just wouldn't. It's hard work, and for not a lot of money. There's no reason to show up to do this if you don't care for people. And so giving them the tools, giving them an opportunity to do the thing that is cost effective and effective, is something I think we can do. And also, when Chris was talking, it brought up for me the in addition to being the interim executive director of the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network, I'm still the communications guy, and we're getting you warm line cards for our warm line, 888-945-1414. And Ross saw them earlier this week, and I'm going to show them to you all because they have on them a symbol that's been showing up in the network's graphics for a long time, and that is that little connector between the Venn diagram parts. Right? It shows up as a lotus flower on the Peer Support Wellness and Respite Center cards. But here it's just made a little bigger, made a little bolder. And each one of those lines is like an opportunity for connection. Like the more of those we find, the more peer support we can provide, and the richer and deeper those relationships will be. And so just focusing on that part, not what's different, but what's together. And those will be available at a respite center near you soon. We have one final question, and I think we have enough time for everyone to go through it. So let's do that. There we go. What keeps you hopeful that dual recovery will become a more fully embraced treatment and recovery model? If you are hopeful, I think you all are. Let's see, who do we want to go? Ray, start us off.
I'll start off with saying safety. Because of the mental health challenges that I live with, I often seek out safe places and safe people, or perceived safe places and safe people. And so I'm looking for places where I can authentically be myself and where I can just show up and ask for what I need, or to say whatever is on my heart, and just being able to be my authentic self. And because I show up as the face of recovery, and I still believe that I present myself as my best self, even when I am symptomatic. And so safety and acceptance is just really big for me.
Thank you. Philip, you want to take it?
I'd love to. So what keeps me hopeful is each and every single one of you that are on this call today, and even those who aren't, speaking out, telling our own lived experiences, telling our stories. We're not going away. We are here. We are not a problem to be solved. We are a solution to changing the world.
Right then. Like that vim and vinegar we got going on over there, the energy, passion is fantastic. Chris Dowling, bring some energy.
Well, I think it was mentioned authenticity. I think that's something that is much needed in our recovery community and in the world, and just in general. People respect and are drawn to authenticity. You know, even though I am a certified peer specialist, I also facilitate double trouble recovery meetings or dual recovery meetings. I'm actually doing one at 2 o'clock right here at our center. So I'll be doing that. And those 14 plus people that come to that meeting every week, you know what I mean? Like, and then the 76 people that are here today, these numbers, the people that are showing up for that keeps me hopeful. And the fact that I can be myself, I can say when I'm having a good day, and I can be authentic with my peers and say, I'm struggling today. And that respect that goes there. Like I've always said, when I got in recovery, I was never going to just talk about the good stuff going on in my life. I was going to talk about the struggles that I go through too, because I feel like you need to have a real view of recovery, and you're going to have some ups and downs, but it's going to be okay, and that you have that support. And we're being here today, so I have a lot of hope for recovery and dual recovery. Thank you.
Thank you. Roz?
Yeah, what keeps me hopeful are events like this today. You know, the work that we do at the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network, and the work of the other organizations, peer-run organizations. I think, you know, as we continue the conversations, things change. As like Philip so eloquently put it, you know, we're not a problem to be solved. We are the solution, and we're not going anywhere. And so, and the spread of peer support, you know, we are out in the private sector, and Heather, you know, has some great statistics about how successful peer support is. And so as peer support continues to spread, and as we continue to do this work, you know, there'll be no choice eventually, but to you know, to have dual recovery fully embraced, to have mental health recovery fully embraced. But that's a whole nother conversation, so I'll leave that alone. But yes, we just have to keep doing what we're doing, and it's happening slowly but surely.
Yeah, you know, it really is. When I was recently at a public health conference in Boston, and every session, because it was a workforce development conference, that's why I was there. There was at least one, and usually many, mentions of certified peer specialists as being the sort of like solution to like every workforce problem in behavioral health. And there were times when I just wanted to stand up and say, y'all, there ain't enough of us. You know, it's not going to work if y'all don't scale this up and quick, and if you don't put in a pathway to having a living income, right? Having a living wage for folks, and having a path forward, and promotion and advancement opportunities. But I can tell you, just the energy around all of these people who I realized and was grateful for, they all knew what peer support was. All of these leaders from basically every state were there, and they were talking about peer support. And I believe for the model to become its fullest, richest version of itself, we'll have to have a deeper embrace of dual recovery. I think it's coming. So thank you all for being here, my panelists. Thank you for taking time out of your day. I know you all had other things you could have been doing, but you chose to be here with us, and we are grateful for you for that. We're also thankful to Emory for hosting us here at the Southeast Mental Health Technologies Transfer Center, and to SAMHSA for funding the work. And Stephanie, I believe you have a couple of words that you'd like to share to walk us out. Is that true?
I do. Just a few words. First and foremost, thank you so much, Chris, Roz, Heather, and our panelists today for sharing this information with our audience. We here at the Southeast MHTTC would like to thank you all for joining us today. We invite you to complete a brief SAMHSA required survey by visiting the link that I just dropped in the chat. Completion of this survey provides information to SAMHSA and helps us plan future events and make them better. Afterwards, you will be automatically redirected to a few more questions from the Southeast MHTTC regarding how this might impact your knowledge and skills. You'll have an opportunity to download a certificate of attendance for your records if that's something that you're interested in. Please allow 5 to 10 seconds for your browser to redirect you between the surveys. Again, thank you all for joining today's presentation. We hope to see you at future events, and please visit our website to learn more. This concludes today's event. Thank you all.
Thank you.